Welcome to sleepy Japan. Tonight, we drift together into a quiet story from Japan, a tale shaped by stillness, tradition, and the soft rhythm of night. Before we begin, take a slow breath in and exhale gently. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your hands rest. Let your thoughts begin to settle as the world around you softens into calm. Imagine a peaceful evening, light from a simple paper lantern drifting across the room, a cool breeze moving just beyond the window. And in the distance, a single temple bell echoing through the night. Each sound carries you deeper into rest. There is nothing you need to do now, nowhere you need to be. Just breathe and let the night open gently around you. Feel peace moving through your body, from your chest to your shoulders, to the quiet rhythm of your breath. The world outside grows silent. Only the sound of your breathing remains, and the soft promise of dreams waiting to unfold. Now, as the moon rises above the hills and the night deepens, let us begin tonight's story. The old man who made withered trees blossom. Tonight, you'll hear an old Japanese tale about love so pure it made even the withered trees bloom again. Let the rhythm of this story guide you toward rest. In the old days, when the world moved with a gentle rhythm of seasons and wind through bamboo groves, there lived an honest man and his wife in a small village, nestled between rolling hills. Their home was humble, built of weathered wood with sliding paper doors that filtered light into soft patterns across tatami mats. The couple had grown old together, their faces lined with wisdom, their hands weathered from tending their garden. Though they possessed little worldly wealth, their days were filled with quiet joy. They rose each morning with the first light, grateful for another day together, and retired each evening to crickets singing their ancient songs. Among their modest possessions was one treasure that brought them particular joy, a faithful dog who had been their companion for many years. He was not remarkable in appearance, with fur the colour of autumn leaves, and eyes that held gentle intelligence. Yet, to the old couple, he was more precious than any jewel in an emperor's treasury. Each day, they shared their simple meals with their beloved companion, offering him choice morsels of fish and the finest portions of rice. The dog would sit patiently beside them, his tail moving in slow, grateful waves, understanding that he was not merely fed, but truly loved. Their garden was a small plot where they grew vegetables and tended fruit trees. The soil was not rich, and the work was sometimes difficult for their aging bodies. But they approached each task with patience, knowing the earth would provide if treated with respect. On this particular morning, as mist clung to distant mountains and cherry blossoms sweetened the air, the old couple made their way to the garden. Morning light filtered through clouds in gentle rays, touching dewdrops on leaves like scattered diamonds. Their faithful dog accompanied them, trotting beside them with comfortable ease. He sniffed at familiar scents, earth after gentle rain, new growth, traces of small creatures who had passed in darkness. The old man carried his tools in a woven basket, while his wife brought tea and rice cakes wrapped in bamboo leaves. They moved slowly, finding joy in the journey itself, rather than rushing toward their destination. As they began their work, he turning earth with his spade, while she tended young shoots, their dog explored the garden with unhurried curiosity. But on this morning, something different captured his attention. Near an old plum tree whose branches showed first hints of spring buds, the dog suddenly stopped. His ears pricked forward. His body grew still with focused attention. "Bow, wow, wow," he began to bark, his voice carrying excitement the old couple had rarely heard. His tail wagged with such enthusiasm. His entire body seemed to dance, and he began pawing at the earth with eager determination. The old couple paused, watching their companion with curious eyes. In all their years together, they had learned the different meanings of his barks, but this bark was different, filled with urgency that seemed to speak of discovery. The dog continued pawing at the ground, claws scraping earth as he worked to uncover whatever had caught his attention. His movements were purposeful, not random digging, but the focused effort of one who had found something remarkable. "What is it, old friend?" the man asked gently, setting down his spade and approaching. "What have you found beneath our humble tree?" The dog looked up with bright eyes, then returned to digging with renewed vigor. The old woman joined them, and together they watched as their companion's efforts revealed something unusual. A glint, a flash, catching morning light and throwing it back in brilliant sparkles. "Perhaps," the old woman said softly, wonder in her voice. "There is something buried here that wishes to be found." The old man nodded thoughtfully, then fetched his spade. With careful, reverent movements, he began to assist, turning earth with the same gentle patience he brought to all tasks. The soil, soft from recent rain, gave way easily beneath his tool. As they dug deeper, the glints became more frequent. Soon they could see that the earth held treasures beyond imagination. Gold pieces lay scattered like fallen stars, their surfaces gleaming with pure light, untouched by time. Silver coins nestled between them, bearing marks of ancient mints, and faces of emperors from dynasties long past. But these were not the only treasures the earth revealed. Ornaments of jade carved with intricate patterns, pearls like drops of captured moonlight, and small figurines of precious stones seemed to watch them with wise, eternal eyes. The old couple worked in reverent silence, gathering each treasure with careful hands, treating each piece as sacred offering rather than mere wealth. They understood this gift was not merely fortune, but a blessing carrying both opportunity and responsibility. As morning sun climbed higher, they completed their extraordinary harvest. Before them lay riches that could transform their simple life into comfort and ease. Yet their first thoughts were not of what they might purchase, but of how this blessing might be shared with those who had even less. "We must give thanks," the old woman said softly, hands folded as she gazed at the treasure. "And we must remember those in our village who struggle to feed their families." Her husband nodded, understanding perfectly. That afternoon, they visited homes of those in need. To the widow struggling to care for young children, they brought gold to ensure her family would not know hunger through winter. To the elderly scholar whose pension barely sustained him, they offered silver for books and medicines. To the temple, they presented a generous offering, asking for prayers for all creatures, including their faithful dog who had led them to such fortune. With remaining treasure, they purchased rice fields and cornfields, not from desire for wealth, but to ensure security in their advancing years, and means to continue charitable works. They approached their new prosperity with the same gentle wisdom they had brought to poverty. Understanding happiness came not from possession, but from proper use of whatever gifts life provided. Their dog, who had been the instrument of this remarkable change, received no special treatment beyond what he had always known. The finest food they could provide, a warm place by the fire, and constant assurance of their love. They understood he had acted not from desire for reward, but from pure love between faithful companions. The seasons turned as seasons do, and the old couple settled into their new life with the same gentle wisdom they had always known. Word of their good fortune spread throughout the village and beyond, as such news inevitably does. Most who heard the tale responded with joy, understanding that such blessings could only have come to those whose hearts were pure. But in the house next to theirs lived a couple of very different character. Where the honest old man and his wife were generous and kind, these neighbours were covetous and grasping. The husband's face had been shaped by years of scowling, his eyes narrow with suspicion. His wife was no different, her voice sharp with complaint, her hands always grasping. When news of their neighbours' sudden wealth reached them, it struck like a thorn in their hearts. They could not sleep for thinking of treasure found so close to their dwelling. They could not eat for the bitter taste of envy. They could not rest for the burning desire to possess what their neighbours had gained. For days they watched their neighbour's house with jealous eyes, noting every improvement, every sign of increased comfort. "It is not fair," the covetous woman would mutter. "Why should they receive such fortune?" Her husband would nod bitterly. If their dog could find one cash, surely there are others waiting. Finally, they could contain their desire no longer. With hearts full of greed, they approached their neighbour's home one misty morning. They found the old couple tending their garden, their dog resting contentedly in sunlight. The sight of such peaceful prosperity only inflamed their jealousy, but they forced themselves to speak with false kindness. "Good morning, honoured neighbours," the covetous man called out, his voice strained with concealed feelings. "We have heard of your wonderful fortune." The honest old man looked up with genuine warmth. "Indeed, we have been blessed beyond our deserving, and we are grateful each day." The covetous woman stepped forward, eyes fixed on the peaceful dog. "We have heard that your faithful companion led you to this treasure. What a remarkable animal he must be." "He is indeed remarkable," the old woman agreed, "but we believe his gift came not from magic, but from the pure heart that has always guided him." The neighbours exchanged glances, minds working toward the same selfish goal. "We were wondering," the covetous man said slowly, "whether you might be willing to lend us your dog for a few days. We thought perhaps our garden might hold treasures as well." The old couple hesitated, reluctant to part with their beloved companion. The dog had never spent a night away from their home, and they worried he might be confused or distressed. But their natural kindness overcame reluctance. "If you truly believe it might be beneficial," the old man said slowly, "and if you promise to care for him as gently as we do, then perhaps we could allow him to visit for a short time." "Oh, we will care for him as if he were our own precious treasure," the covetous woman assured them, hands already reaching toward the dog. And so, with heavy hearts but trusting intentions, the old couple allowed their neighbors to lead their faithful dog away. They watched from their garden as the animal was taken next door, his tail wagging uncertainly as he looked back with confused eyes. The covetous couple wasted no time. They had prepared an elaborate feast: fish, tender rice, and delicacies arranged with misplaced grandeur. "Come, Mr. Dog," the covetous man said with false heartiness, setting the meal before the confused animal. "Eat well, and then we hope you will show us the same favor you showed our neighbors." But the dog, who had lived his entire life surrounded by genuine love, could sense immediately that something was not right in this household. The voices that spoke to him were strained with insincerity, and the hands that reached toward him carried the tension of those whose motives were impure. He sniffed politely at the food that had been prepared, but his appetite had vanished in the strange atmosphere. The covetous couple watched with growing frustration as their expensive feast went untouched. They had expected gratitude and immediate cooperation. "Perhaps he is not hungry," the woman suggested through gritted teeth. "Let us take him to the garden." They attached a rope to the dog's collar, something that had never been done in his previous home, where he had always been free to roam. The rough hemp chafed against his neck, adding to his growing unease and homesickness. Once in the garden, they began dragging him from place to place, their movements hurried and impatient, so different from the calm, respectful pace of his true masters. Here, the man would command, pointing to particular spots, "Dig here and show us where treasure lies hidden." But the dog, confused and distressed by this treatment, could only look up with sad, bewildered eyes. The gift hand that had led him to treasure in his master's garden had come from love. Love for those who had cared for him faithfully, and desire to bring them joy. In this place, surrounded by greed and impatience, that same gift seemed to have deserted him entirely. For hours, they led him back and forth across their garden, voices growing sharper with each moment that failed to bring discovery. The sun beat down with increasing intensity, but they would not allow him to rest in shade. Finally, in exhaustion and confusion, the dog stopped at a particular spot near the back wall. It was not that he sensed treasure there, but simply that he could walk no further. His paws were sore from being dragged across unfamiliar ground, his throat dry from panting in heat, his heart heavy with longing for his true home. Seeing him stop and begin to sniff at the ground, the covetous couple immediately assumed their goal was within reach. "This must be the place," the man exclaimed, eyes gleaming with anticipation. They seized their spades with eager hands and began attacking the earth with violent enthusiasm. Their movements were frantic and graceless, so different from the reverent excavation their neighbors had performed. But as they dug deeper, instead of gleaming treasure, they encountered only rotting vegetation and refuse. The stench grew stronger with each shovelful, until they were forced to cover their noses. Still, they continued, unable to accept that their dreams of easy wealth were dissolving into nightmare. When they finally reached the bottom, they found nothing but the most offensive refuse, scraps of spoiled food, bones of long dead animals, and other waste left to decay over many seasons. The fury that rose in their hearts was like a fire that consumed all reason, all their dreams of wealth, all their carefully laid plans, were reduced to nothing but the stinking pile of garbage at their feet. And standing nearby, panting with exhaustion and confusion, was the dog who had led them to this humiliating disappointment. "Worthless cur!" the man shouted, his face red with rage and humiliation. The dog, who understood nothing of their expectations, and had never intended any harm, cowered at the violence in their voices. Without pausing to consider the consequences, driven by rage beyond all reason, they seized the frightened animal and ended his gentle life in a moment of terrible cruelty. When their rage had cooled and they realized what they had done, they felt not remorse but new fear of what their neighbors would say. Hastily, they buried the poor creature at the base of a pine tree in their garden, hoping to conceal their crime beneath the earth. Meanwhile, in the house next door, the old couple had spent a sleepless night, worrying about their faithful friend. As hours passed and he did not return, their concern grew into deep anxiety that sat heavy in their hearts. They had never been separated from him for so long, and their simple daily routines felt empty without his companionship. When morning came, and still there was no sign of their dog, the old man could bear the uncertainty no longer. With trembling steps, he made his way to his neighbor's house, his heart filled with terrible foreboding. He found the covetous couple working in their garden, their movements nervous and eyes unable to meet his gaze. "The dog is dead," the man said abruptly, words falling like stones into morning stillness. "We killed him and buried him at the root of that pine tree." He gestured carelessly toward the back of their garden, as if discussing nothing more significant than disposal of refuse. The words struck the old man like physical blows. His faithful companion, who had been alive and healthy just the day before, was gone forever. And he had died not from age or illness, but from the cruelty of those to whom kindness had been shown. Tears began to flow down his weathered cheeks as the full reality of the loss settled into his heart. His wife, watching from their doorway, saw his distress and came running. And when she learned what had befallen their beloved friend, her own grief joined his, in a sorrow too deep for words. But even in their anguish, the old couple's first impulse was not toward anger or revenge, but toward honoring the memory of their faithful companion. Hand in hand, they made their way to the spot their neighbor had indicated, their steps slow and heavy with grief. There, beneath the pine tree, they could see the disturbed earth where their dog had been hastily buried. The sight of that lonely grave, so far from the home where he had been loved, brought fresh tears to their eyes. But they had not come to add their sorrow to his resting place. They had come to ensure that even in death, he would know the love that had filled his life. From their home, they brought a lacquered tray, and upon it they arranged the finest foods they possessed. Fish prepared with delicate care, rice that gleamed like small pearls, and fresh fruits they had been saving. They lit sticks of incense, their sweet smoke rising into the still air like prayers made visible, carrying their love and gratitude to whatever realm their companion's spirit might have entered. From their garden they gathered flowers, early chrysanthemums whose golden faces seemed to hold the warmth of the sun, branches of cherry blossom, and sprigs of bamboo that represented the enduring strength of faithful love. These they arranged around the grave with careful hands, creating a garden of remembrance that transformed the lonely spot into a shrine worthy of their friend's pure heart. "Faithful friend," the old woman whispered softly, "you brought us treasure greater than gold, for you showed us that love truly given always returns multiplied. Rest now in peace, knowing you are cherished in life and will be remembered with gratitude for all our days." They remained by the graveside until the sun began to set, their silent vigil a testament to love's depth. When they finally rose to return home, they carried not only sorrow, but renewed appreciation for the precious nature of faithful love. Days passed in quiet mourning, and the old couple found their grief, while deep, was not bitter. They had loved truly and been loved in return. It was on the 7th night that the old man experienced a dream unlike any before. In his sleep, he found himself in his garden, but it was transformed by light that seemed to come from within the earth itself. The familiar plants glowed with inner radiance, and the air shimmered with peace. There, beneath the plum tree where their treasure had been discovered, sat their faithful dog. But he was no longer the earthly creature they had known. His form seemed woven from moonlight and starshine, translucent yet more real than anything the waking world contained. His eyes held the same gentle intelligence they remembered. But now there was something more, a wisdom that spoke of mysteries beyond ordinary sight. The spirit dog rose and approached, with the same unhurried grace that had characterized his earthly movements. When he reached his master's side, he looked up with luminous eyes and spoke, though no sound disturbed the perfect silence. "Beloved master," the words formed directly in the old man's understanding, "your tears have watered the earth above my resting place, and your love has transformed sorrow into something beautiful. But there is one more gift I am permitted to give, one final blessing that will honor the bond between us." The dream dog turned toward the pine tree under which his earthly form lay buried, and as he did so, the tree began to glow with the same inner light. "When the sun rises," the spirit continued, "you must come to my resting place. There you will find that the pine has given up a portion of itself, dried needles and small branches that have fallen during the night. Gather these remnants with reverent hands. Take these offerings and place them in your mortar. Grind them to powder with the pestle that has known the touch of your hands. And as you work, remember all the joy we shared together. When the powder is fine as silk, take it to any tree that appears dead or withered. Scatter the powder at its roots with the same love that you scattered flowers upon my grave, and you will witness the power that flows from true devotion." The old man knelt in the dreamlight and reached out to touch his companion one final time. His fingers passed through the luminous form like water, But he felt a warmth more real than physical touch, the warmth of eternal affection that binds one soul to another across all boundaries. This gift comes not from magic, the spirit dog's final words whispered, but from the law that governs all true love. That which is given freely returns multiplied, and that which is planted in sincere devotion will bloom beyond imagination. The vision began to fade, as first hints of dawn touched the edges of the dreaming world. The old man woke to find tears upon his cheeks, but they were not tears of sorrow alone. Mixed with grief was a joy he could not fully understand, a sense that death was not an ending but a transformation. The old man rose before his wife, moving through their house with unusual urgency. The dream remained vivid, each detail clear as crystal in morning light. He made his way to the pine tree, his heart filled with anticipation and reverence. There, scattered around the tree's base, exactly as the spirit had promised, lay dried pine needles and small twigs. They had not been there the evening before, yet here they were, arranged in a pattern too deliberate to be chance. With trembling hands, the old man gathered the pine remnants, treating each piece as precious. He carried them home, where his wife was preparing their morning meal. When she saw the pine needles in his hands and observed the strange peace that had replaced grief in his expression, she listened as he recounted the dream. She nodded slowly, as if such miraculous visitations were not beyond possibility for those who loved truly and lived simply. "The mortar and pestle are on the shelf," she said quietly, "and in the village, old Tanaka-san's cherry tree has shown no life for 3 seasons now." Together, they prepared the gift their departed friend had made possible. The old man placed the pine needles and twigs within the stone mortar, then began the rhythmic work of grinding them to powder. As the pestle moved in its ancient circle, both found themselves remembering their faithful dog, not with sadness now, but with gratitude for all the joy he had brought. The work was meditative, the circular motion creating a rhythm like a gentle heartbeat. With each turn, the pine needles released a clean forest fragrance. The powder grew finer and finer, until it resembled precious spice. When the task was complete, the old man transferred the powder to a small silk pouch his wife had embroidered with cherry blossoms. They made their way through the village in gentle morning light, their destination the edge of the village, where old Tanaka-san's house stood. The cherry tree stood in the center like a monument to loss. Its trunk was grey and scarred, its branches bare of any hint of leaf or bud. For 3 seasons it had stood thus, seemingly dead, but somehow still upright, as if sustained by memory alone. The old man approached the withered tree with the same reverence he had shown at his dog's grave. Kneeling at its base, he opened the silk pouch and began to scatter the pine powder around the roots, letting it fall like gentle snow onto the dark earth. As he worked, he spoke to the sleeping spirit within the wood, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "Ancient friend," he whispered, "you who once brought joy to many hearts with your beauty, accept this gift that comes from love freely given. Let the devotion that created this powder awaken the life that sleeps within your branches, and bloom once more in honor of all who have found peace beneath your shade." His wife stood nearby, hands folded in prayer, adding her silent blessing to his spoken words. The powder settled into the soil around the tree's base, disappearing as if absorbed by earth that had been thirsting for exactly this gift. For a moment, nothing seemed to change. The tree remained as barren as it had for 3 seasons past. The morning breeze stirred its empty branches, with the same hollow sound that had marked its apparent death. Then, slowly, as if responding to some deep and hidden summons, a change began to manifest in the tree's highest branches. At first, it was nothing more than a slight swelling at the tips of the smallest twigs, so subtle it might have been dismissed as a trick of light. But the swelling continued, growing more pronounced with each passing moment. Tiny buds appeared where there had been nothing but bare wood, and the buds themselves began to swell and lengthen, preparing to burst into bloom. The transformation spread downward through the tree like water flowing through dry earth. Branch after branch began to show signs of awakening life, and the grey bark itself seemed to take on a healthier hue, as if sap had begun to flow once more through vessels that had been dry for years. Within moments, the first blossoms began to open. They were the pale pink of sunrise clouds, each petal perfect in its delicate beauty. But these flowers were unlike any cherry blossoms the old couple had ever seen. They seemed to glow with an inner light, and their fragrance carried a sweetness that spoke of more than earthly spring. The blooming spread like joy itself through the branches of the reborn tree. Where moments before there had been only death and barrenness, now there was a cascade of flowers so abundant and beautiful. It seemed the tree had saved 3 seasons' worth of blossoming for this single miraculous moment. News of the miracle spread through the village like wildfire. Old Tanaka-san, who had been working in his vegetable garden, rushed to witness the transformation. Tears of joy streamed down his weathered face as he gazed upon the restored beauty that had been lost for so long. Neighbours gathered from every corner of the village, drawn by reports of the impossible sight. Children pressed close to their parents, their eyes wide with wonder at the magical tree that had returned from death to celebrate life with unprecedented beauty. But in the midst of celebration, the old couple remained quietly by the tree's side, their hearts filled not with triumph, but with gratitude. They understood that they had been instruments of a power greater than themselves, servants of a love that transcended the boundaries between life and death. Word of the miracle could not be contained. The story spread to neighbouring settlements and beyond, carrying with it both wonder and hope. But it was inevitable that the tale would reach the ears of the covetous couple who lived next door. When they learned that their neighbours had somehow gained the power to restore life to dead trees, their old greed awakened with renewed fury. They had thought their days of jealousy were behind them, but now, faced with evidence of an even greater power, their envious hearts began to burn once more. "It must have something to do with that accursed dog," the covetous man muttered. "Even in death, the creature continues to bring them fortune." His wife's eyes glittered with the same greedy light. Perhaps the secret lies in the tree under which the dog was buried. Without pausing to consider the implications, or to remember the cruel end that had resulted from their previous attempt, they waited until darkness fell. Then, armed with shovels and driven by the same covetous desire, they crept into their own garden. With eager hands, they began to dig, disturbing the peaceful rest they had themselves created. They worked quickly, throwing earth carelessly about. When they reached the remains of the dog they had killed, they showed no reverence for the creature they had wronged. Instead, they gathered what bones they could find, handling them with the same callous disregard they had shown in life. These remains they carried to their own mortar, grinding them to powder with harsh, impatient movements. Unlike the gentle rhythm the old man had used, their work was violent and graceless, driven by greed rather than love. When their grim task was complete, they carried the powder to a withered plum tree in their own garden, a tree that had died from neglect. With none of the reverence the old man had shown, they scattered the bone powder around its roots, expecting to witness the same miraculous transformation. But the tree remained as dead as before. No blossoms appeared on its barren branches. No life stirred in its grey wood. If anything, the tree seemed to become more lifeless still, as if the presence of powder, ground from bones taken in violence, had poisoned the very earth around its roots. Frustrated and angry, the covetous couple applied more powder, then more still, until they had used all they had prepared. Finally, in a fury born of disappointment, they began to throw handfuls of the remaining powder into the air, hoping that some of it might land on living trees. But the wind, which had been still during their shameful excavation, suddenly began to blow with unusual force. The powder, instead of settling on the living plants, was caught up in the gusts and blown directly back into their faces. The bone dust filled their eyes and mouths, causing them to cough and choke as they stumbled about their garden in confusion. The taste was bitter beyond description, and the feel of it against their skin was like the touch of something long dead and corrupt. Meanwhile, the old couple continued to tend their daily routines, with the same gentle wisdom they had always shown. The miracle they had witnessed had deepened their understanding of the mysterious ways in which love continues to work. They visited the reborn cherry tree each day, not as its creators, but as humble witnesses to the power of faithful devotion. The tree continued to bloom with unprecedented beauty, its flowers renewing themselves, creating a cycle of beauty that seemed to have no end. Visitors came from distant provinces to see the miracle tree, and the old couple would tell the story of their beloved companion, speaking not of magic, but of the simple truth that love freely given has the power to transform even death into a source of life and beauty. As the seasons turned, the old couple found that their grief had transformed into something deeper. They had learned that death was not the end of love, but merely its transformation, and that the bonds formed between faithful hearts continue to bear fruit. Their remaining years were peaceful, filled with the quiet joy that comes to those who have learned to see the sacred in the ordinary. Each evening, as the sun set, they would sit beneath the miraculous cherry tree and speak softly of the day's small joys. The tree's blossoms would glow gently in the twilight, their sweet fragrance filling the air with the essence of peace. And sometimes, in the gentle rustling of the leaves, they would sense the presence of their beloved companion, still faithfully watching over them, still bringing beauty and blessing through the power of love that knows no ending. The years flowed by like a gentle stream, and the old couple grew older still. The miraculous tree became a beloved landmark, drawing pilgrims and poets, all seeking to witness the beauty that had been born from faithful love. When their own time came to join their faithful companion, they faced the transition with quiet courage. Their last sight of the earthly world was of cherry blossoms falling like gentle snow, each petal carrying the promise that love, once kindled, burns forever. The tree continued to bloom through all the seasons that followed, its beauty unmarked by the passage of years. And those who came to witness its miraculous flowers often spoke of feeling a presence there, not of anything to be feared, but of love made manifest, of devotion transformed into eternal spring. And so the story ends as all true stories do, not with finality, but with continuation, with the promise that love, like the blossoming tree, knows no end. A reminder that in a world often marked by sorrow, beauty still has the power to transform. Love still has the strength to heal, and faithfulness still can make the withered tree bloom again. And so, the blossoms fall, the night grows still, and peace returns once more.